You'll notice a location in the lower left and a date in the lower right on the Jewish calendar, because that's how I first encountered Vera. And the cast in order of appearance: Robert Joshua, somebody called him Richard, he was Robert, Vera Florence Cooper Rubin, Judith Shawn Rubin Young, and supporting cast. And here is the full family with Judith at the center. Carl is in fact in the math department at UC Irvine. I did a little bit of fact checking with him. Outline: 3 anecdotes and a remarkable coincidence. I'll skip the genealogies because we're running late. Yes, this will be on the exam. Before dark matter, after dark matter, and her heiresses. The 3 anecdotes. Fall 1985, phone rang. It's Vera. Please send me your CV and don't ask why. That's actually very useful. I've used that to nominate people for other things that they've gotten. Please send me your CV and don't ask why. It resulted in my getting the J. Murray Luck Prize of the National Academy, a put down from Frank Press, a chance to have dinner with Lynn Margulis, and a promotion at UC Irvine. Summer 1982, the IAU in Patras, Greece, and the following symposium. Vera was the incoming president of Commission 28, Galaxies. She was the second woman president. 28 was the first commission to have 2 women presidents, and in due course 3. The first commission to have a woman president was in fact the Variable Stars, and it was Anne Underhill, Anne Barbara Underhill. Somebody had suggested a working group on supernovae. I said it was a good idea, so she said, well, you chair it and do something. So we had a supernova working group, and along came 1987A, and we'd done our job well. Observatories were prepared for a working group and a supernova, and they knew what to do, and so we voted ourselves out of existence in a few years. We weren't needed anymore. Still back further in time, right around New Year's, 71, 72, at Temple Sinai, Military Road, not very far from here, I guess. Joe Weber was sitting next to Vera Cooper Rubin and asked her, who is Virginia Trimble? Vera's response was, well, she goes to lots of meetings and always looks absolutely elegant. Joe's response was to write to me and ask me to dinner. We were married less than 2 months afterwards. And it lasted until he died 28 years later. But here's the truly remarkable coincidence. Question to the audience: how many of you prepared for this meeting by rereading Vera's article in annual reviews? I don't mean the rotation curve, I mean the Jim, fine fellow. Anybody else? Then I have a surprise for you. Question to Vera: who taught the very first astronomy course you ever taught in college? Question to VT: who taught the very first astronomy course you ever took in college? Silence. It's going to be on the exam. There she is, Maud Levon Rooster Makehamson. Had a PhD from Berkeley. She married a Makehamson, had 3 children, divorced. She was at Vassar for many years, where she taught Vera, and then she was at UCLA for a few years, where she taught me. Her primary territory was asteroid orbits, but she developed an interest in Mayan and Polynesian astronomy and made progress on that. She worked during World War II, World War I, crikey, where it wasn't that long ago, guys, where the weather maps and forecasts were classified. Now, there is Vera and there is Virginia, both as undergraduates. And she's at a telescope and I'm making a measurement in an undergraduate physics lab. I own the picture of me because the photographer from Life magazine gave it to me. Now, yes, this will be on the exam. There are, in fact, 20 questions. I won't have time for all of them, but we'll try to do as many as possible. And each time the questions will come up again with a little dot saying which one. What day of the week was the 25th of June, 1948? Anybody? You have 2 seconds. No, because she mentions in her autobiography they got married before sunset. Now do you know what day it was? Louder. Friday, of course, yes, because they had to marry before sunset. Jews don't marry on the Sabbath, traditionally, unless dire emergency. So indeed, it was a Friday, and there's a calendar to prove it. Which was the first galaxy whose rotation curve had VCR as a co-author, and with whom? Yes, with the Burbages, and Crampon and Pendergast. That's a nice picture of Margaret, isn't it? There's no such thing as a nice picture of Jeff, but that was the best I could find. I liked, hugging Jeff Burbage was like drowning in marshmallow. 3. Which Rubin wrote one paper each with 2 different female co-authors with surname Moore? Tell me more. There we are. Charlotte Moore and Sandra Moore, whom you may know as Faber. Who won the Annie J. Cannon Prize? Yes, precisely. But that is Annie J. Cannon, and it was, of course, Judith Sharn Young. Frequently reproduced image with a Gartner measuring machine. Which observatory did Gartner Machine Company start up to produce instruments for? Yerkes. And there is Vera, a commonly reproduced Vera with the Gartner. In the same time frame that I was using a Grant measuring engine, which was much more successful for many things. When she earned her degree at Cornell, Martha Stair Carpenter was the junior astronomer. Who was the senior astronomer at Cornell that Vera studied with? That's Vera Stair Carpenter. And that's William Shaw of Shaw and Boothroyd. Anybody old enough to have had lab astronomy from Shaw and Boothroyd? Probably not, except me. George Gamow had 2 graduate students at Georgetown. Vera was one. Who was the other? Yes, bravo. And there is Ralph. Which Gamow was once Vera Cooper Rubin's co-author? It's not a trick question. The son, Igor, who has a very interesting web presence of a kind that got him fired. And he, like everybody else, says he wasn't guilty. Who suggested that she work with Gamow? Whether he's Hayden or Haydn. I'm sure he said Hayden, but somebody said Haydn this morning. I don't know. I knew him only very slightly. My Jesuit was George Coyne and Martin McCarthy. Who concluded the acknowledgments of an early paper by thanking the other one for patience and encouragement? Robert. General chemical physics. He was a quite distinguished chemical physicist with a long publication record, and I believe that first paper is the only one that thanks his wife for encouragement. Now we have the second list of questions. Who concluded an acknowledgement of an early paper by saying the project had been fully discussed with the other? That was Vera writing in, an early paper with solar limb darkening. Not something you normally know about that she did. Eclipse data and a Burroughs E102 computer. Computers used to be women. And so when computer science first started, a lot of it was done by women. If you now go to a university department, the only place that has fewer women than physics is computer sciences. I don't know what happened. Which galaxy first had Ford as a co-author? This you're supposed to know. 5, 4, 3, 2, no, as it happens. 3C33, it's a quasar, but it's a galaxy. And that was their first joint publication. Those pictures are just a bunch of nice galaxies that they worked on at some point. I mean, all the pictures were collected by one of our staff members. I just said, make a pretty picture out of it. So she did. She's good at that. Who wrote a paper with a much more senior female co-author about the isotopic composition of cosmic rays, and who was the co-author? That was Judith, working with Phyllis St. Cyr Fryer and C.J. Waddington, who's the half-brother of Martin Rees's wife. That's your useless factoid for today. But Phyllis St. Cyr Fryer was actually the discoverer of heavy elements in cosmic rays. Who wrote an abstract refuting a statement by Joseph Needham, the classic exponent of history of Chinese astronomer, and what was stated that they refuted? Whose abstract, what did they refute? That's a cheat because it's both of them. And that is Joseph Needham in his early days as a chemist. He was very handsome as a young man. Do I have time for one Joseph Needham story? Okay. That might be a good choice. He also told me how to pronounce the names, the words in the Crab Nebulae report of the supernova from 1054 in the Chinese data. And in fact, what he had claimed in one of his books was that there was an image of M1, the Crab Nebula, from 1627 in the Chinese literature, and the Rubin showed that that wasn't true. Who won the Maria Geppert-Mayer Prize? That's Maria Geppert-Mayer, and it was Judith who won that one as well. Incidentally, her middle name really was Scharn. That is something I checked with Carl. And my first thought was Rose of Scharn, as in the Dust Bowl novel. What's it called? Grapes of Math. And my second thought was a dictionary word. I won't tell you what the dictionary word meant. You can look it up for yourself. But Judith was the first astronomer to win the Maria Geppert-Mayer. And since then, we've really been overrepresented because even president of the IAU, Jacqueline Andreaguez Changpei Ma, sorry about the misspelling of name, sorry about that. She's not a pie, she's a very nice young lady, middle-aged lady, who wrote an APJ paper with Robert Herman. That's Herman, and it was Bob Rubin who wrote with him, and it's an APJ paper on spectroscopy. Who was the first author on Vera's annual review's rotation paper? Yoshiaki Safui, and it's in 2001. She eventually spoke at a Texas symposium, though EMB Margaret was first. But which was the first Texas symposium that Vera attended? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? My first was 3. Which was Vera's first Texas symposium? No? You don't have many choices. But she was at 1. Oops, now what's gone wrong? We are not advancing. There we are. That is the first Dallas, Texas symposium from December of '63. And I've just put marks by the names. She's red, if you can tell the difference in the colors. And I've just put marks by the names of the people I knew. But notice that Kip Thorne was there, and Beatrice Tinsley, and Brian Tinsley, Harold Urey, DeVoe, Joe Weber, whom I did not know at the time, Vitamin of White Dwarfs, John Wheeler, Wolfgang Rindler, who just died fairly recently, Ivor Robinson, Nathan Rosen, a very interesting person, R.K. Sachs, Ed Salpeter, Peter Scheuer of P of D, Helge Krog's cosmology book, he never understood P of D, Martin Schmidt, Engelhart Schucking, many others. Which galaxy was first addressed by Vera and Judith together? I don't know, but it was an SC1 because that's what the paper is about. And there they both are smiling. That's a classic Vera picture. That's the one from the annual reviews. Which was the first galaxy addressed by Vera and Judith under her married name? NDC 2148, and it's a AAS bulletin again. Anyway, you have not done very well on the exam. The Italian connection, her work with Bertola and de Odorico, and there they are, relatively young. Before dark matter, she worked on Gamma Cas and was pleased that Margaret Burbage had collected a lot of data. Gamma Cas was actually Margaret's PhD dissertation. And the her value of H was in fact 600 kilometers per second. And that was on the old distance scale, so it was about the same as Hubble's number. Her thesis, of course, was the clustering. And both of these were right in their thrust, if not in the details. The form of the Milky Way spiral arms, solar limb darking I mentioned before, faint emission lines in arc spectra of iron with Carl C. Kies, the father of Margaret Kies Krogdahl, who's part of the Jessie Greenstein story. She went to Chicago and did a PhD with Chandra, married and dropped out of astronomy. And Jessie carried that away along with a few other women as no use getting women PhDs, they just get married and drop out. You see a certain number of counterexamples around you today. And she did a galaxy structure paper and stars with Martin McCarthy. And then, of course, the first flat rotation curve that you've already heard about. Oh, her first flat rotation curve was the Milky Way, actually. Other and later, she did a paper with Merle Tuve, who was her boss, faint blue stars in the Milky Way anti-center. Anisotropy in the expansion of the universe, which I think is not yet fully excluded in some ways. That's some of what might be Jim Peebles' new stuff. The first counter-rotating galaxies, interacting galaxies, polar ring galaxies, and again the Italian connection. Co-authors, this is a lower limit. This is just the women I know that worked with her. It includes J. Lee Mead, who was J. Lee Burley in those days, and the idea of having undergraduate co-authors, and there are a couple of mine there. about writing things with your mother. Also Cecilia Payne and her daughter, Catherine Haramondanis, and I and my mother used to write poems together. This is the end. We're still not back on time, but I took 10 minutes off our being late.